A New York judge is set to decide very soon, he says, whether to dismiss Virginia Giuffre's allegations of sexual assault against the Duke of York. As I said yesterday, I have no time for either Prince Andrew or the dirty, rotten, stinking, corrupt American justice system, so I don't really have a dog in this fight, but I did listen to what the court hearing had to offer today, and someone who knows what it all means is one of the sharpest of legal commentators, Joshua Rozenberg, QC. Joshua, two questions, I guess, really. I've read what you make of the agreement and your interpretation of it, because it's not really like something you'd expect to find in any other common law court. It's a particular American perversion of these things, I think. What do you make of that agreement, and what do you make of the way the Duke of York's lawyers carried on in court today?
I think the Duke of York's lawyers were perfectly entitled to refer to that agreement on his behalf. It's their duty to put forward all arguments they properly can, and they took the view that this agreement exempted Prince Andrew from the claim by Virginia Giuffre and meant that she couldn't sue because she had promised that she wouldn't sue people who could take advantage of the agreement. That was what he said anyway.
But there was also a lot of talk as to what you mentioned, I think, on air yesterday, this extraordinary comprehensive thing. This agreement shall apply from the beginning of the world to the date of signature, which would seem to be all-encompassing. But the lawyers today and the judge as well seem to think that, as always with these motions, a lot of it was all pretty loosey-goosey, and it was actually harder to determine its scope than that sentence would appear to mean.
That's right. Judge Lewis Kaplan raised two objections to the arguments being put by Prince Andrew's lawyer, Andrew Brettler. One of the passages he was concerned about says the first parties were Virginia Giuffre's team, and second parties, that was Jeffrey Epstein's team, agree that the terms of this settlement agreement are not intended to be used by any other person nor be admissible in any proceeding or case against or involving Jeffrey Epstein, either civil or criminal. Now, what did that mean? I have to say, I thought it meant that the document couldn't be used in any civil or criminal proceedings that might be brought against Epstein. But the judge seemed to think rather differently. He seemed to think, and he's the judge, that only Epstein and Giuffre could enforce the agreement, which means that Prince Andrew can't. And then the judge mentioned another passage in the agreement. He was asking questions of Giuffre's lawyer, David Boys, and that reads like this. It says, "Neither this settlement agreement nor any copy nor the terms shall be used or disclosed in any court, arbitration, or other legal proceedings except to enforce the provisions of this settlement agreement." And as far as the judge could see, this meant that the parties, Epstein and Giuffre, had intended that the agreement would be confidential. And if it was going to be confidential, well, how would somebody like Prince Andrew be able to even to hear about it, let alone rely on it? So in other words, the judge was not, as far as I can see, very persuaded by the arguments being put by Prince Andrew's lawyers that this agreement protected him from the claim being brought against him.
Do you think there's a bigger problem here for the prince, in that he's the son of the Queen? There was a case, whatever it was now, a couple of decades back, with the rapper Snoop Dogg. It was a murder case, and he got off on a technicality. And you can argue that, like rappers, it's okay to get off on a technicality. But if it's the Duke of York being perceived to have gotten off on a technicality, doesn't that mean in the broader scheme of things he loses as well?
Well, the first point to make is, of course, this isn't a criminal case. This is a civil claim against the prince. Secondly, you can certainly say it's unattractive to rely on an agreement which cost Epstein $500,000, when you, the prince, haven't contributed any money to it and weren't perhaps even aware of it originally, certainly weren't involved in it. On the other hand, if you have lawyers, they are there to put all arguments that can properly be put. And if they say that this worked for Alan Dershowitz, which is what they're saying, if they say that it was intended to protect associates of Jeffrey Epstein, and Prince Andrew was a friend of his, from further legal action, because after all, Virginia Giuffre has already got damages, $500,000, and she's seeking damages now. Well, if that's the argument, it seems reasonable to put it. Whether or not it works is what we're going to wait to see when we hear from the judge.